Did the Baylor Bears make a serious big money move for one of the best quarterbacks in the transfer portal this past year? Oh boy, this number is going to surprise you on Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on YouTube, Rogue Media Sports Network. Appreciate you making it your first listen today and every day, because we are all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team each and every day. We're getting the final preparations for the Butt Bowl, Baylor Tech. Tomorrow, we're going to look at a surprise story coming out on Thursday about the quarterback that almost was for Baylor and the type of money they threw at this kid. Whoa, big time. Plus, we're going to look at what Joey McGuire had to say about Sawyer Robertson, the Lubbock kid, returns home. Can there be a little bit of extra meaning here? And who does Baylor need to take away personnel-wise in order to have a chance and possibly even win this game over the Red Raiders tomorrow afternoon? All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. The Baylor Bears were searching for a quarterback in the portal in this offseason. Obviously, while we saw some good strides from Sawyer Robertson the end of last year, I think they all felt that they needed to go out and at least get some competition, but really looking for a starting quarterback. They ended up with Daquan Finn, the MAC Player of the Year in 2023, get him out of Toledo, a guy who I was really high on coming out of the portal and didn't have a great first few games with Baylor. Also got hurt in that Utah game, and we still don't even know if he's been cleared to play. And there's been a bunch of kind of wonder around Baylor Nation, speculation on how much a guy like Daquan Finn is getting paid in NIL. Because we've heard the going rates for quarterbacks these days in the transfer portal are astronomical. You know, Matt Rule, former Baylor coach, last year was saying it takes over $1 million to get a real top-end starting quarterback to your program through the transfer portal. So Daquan Finn's probably not making $1 million, probably making some decent coin for people like you and me, and those who are still in college is probably getting a pretty good paycheck to come here and be the Bears starting quarterback, at least to start the season. But apparently that was not the number one option for this Baylor staff that knew they were going to need to go out and get somebody. They swung for the fences. According to my friend of the show and Inside the 12 host, Pete Souza, this is what he had to say on the Pete Souza show about who Baylor went after in this offseason.
I heard a rumor, hang on to your seat here, that Will Howard was offered $4 million from Baylor and turned it down. And I heard that from a pretty good source.
Whoa. Will Howard, arguably the best quarterback out there in the transfer portal. Every list you saw, Gabriel Howard, just which way you wanted to go. And obviously he had some very good years at Kansas State, but to hear that Baylor was throwing that kind of money out there is shocking. And by the way, I talked with Pete about this. He wants it to be clear that this was not a source from within the walls at Baylor, but one that is very familiar with this situation, and one that I would absolutely trust as well as Pete did running with it. Not a Baylor source, but that number seems to be pretty accurate from this source that he heard it from. And boy, golly, whoa. Baylor, $4 million. This is a program that wasn't dishing out anything in NIL like 2 years ago. They didn't want anything to be transactional. And now you're out here telling me that they went out and ponied up $4 million. No, that's Alabama money. That's Michigan money, Ohio State money, Oregon, Nebraska, that kind of money. That's not Baylor money. Most times, no, it's not. But honestly, you got to think about the context here. This is a handsomely paid head coach and one that the athletic director has hitched his wagon to, and they know that it's desperate times and therefore desperate measures. Baylor can raise money, and at that point, $4 million still seems like a lot, but I wouldn't be surprised if they ponied up a couple $1 million from some benefactors, some friends of the program, to arrange an NIL deal for Will Howard. And obviously, he's getting buku bucks at Ohio State. The only real reported NIL deal we've seen from Ohio State is just a little over $1 million, which is what Quinn Ewers got in his 1 year on campus there. So we know there's the numbers in the millions, but for Will Howard to be turning down a roughly $4 million deal, what does that say about college football? What does that say about the player? More importantly, most importantly on this podcast, what does it say about Baylor? Because the Bears and Dave Aranda have seen Will Howard just carve them apart the last few years. In fact, the last 2 games, both blowout wins, both 4-score wins by Kansas State. He threw 6 touchdowns and no picks in those 2 games. He barely needed to put his foot on the gas pedal to crush Baylor the last 2 years. So while that number still seems huge for a school like Baylor, does the mentality surprise you? That they would pony up as much cash as possible to go and get a guy who's carved them up at the most important position on the football field for a coaching staff that has really not fully gotten quarterback right since they've got in the door? That is a bombshell dropped by Pete Souza. And he told me he was doing it in research for Inside the 12. He was talking to one of his sources about it. And then this story comes up, and I'm sure that will be featured on Inside the 12 in the coming days here. Find that on YouTube. Him and Madison Hawk do that show, but my goodness me, $4 million for Will Howard. If that's true, there's obviously good and bad to it. The bad is that Will Howard looked at the situation and said, no, I'm good. I'm good. $4 million to come and play there. I'm all right. I'll go hear what Ohio State has to say, or whatever, Michigan, USC, hear what they have to say. But on the other hand, that if that's of course 100% true, I think there's something of a positive to take from a Baylor fan to say at least they're out there and, putting out big dollar figures to try and get someone in to help save this program. Of course, it's disheartening that the second option is probably an eighth of that price tag. But man, what a bombshell that is. And obviously, Will Howard he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I mean, he's once again doing it at Ohio State. He's having a big year there. I know they're just coming off a loss in which he had a bad play to end the game. But he's been rolling for Ohio State, a team that's been in the top 5. He's thrown 14 touchdowns to just 3 picks this year. He's already thrown for 1,500 yards in the halfway point of the season. At least there's good ambition there by Baylor, but that sounds like a desperate move for a desperate program. And if they land him, it's the best move they've ever made, probably. I mean, at least in the NIL era, the short-lived NIL era, that would be the best move that they would have made. But when it falls short and a kid turned you down at a $4 million paycheck, that is really tough. But clearly there was ambition there to turn this program around at the quarterback position, because that's what Baylor's needed the last few years. They've had plenty of other problems. Don't get me wrong. This does not exclude the problems of the offensive line, of the defensive line the last few years, their lack of forcing turnovers, the way the coverage has been in the last couple of weeks, their inability to establish the run. There's all kinds of issues for this program over the 2023 and now 2024 seasons. But if you look at Dave Aranda's tenure, there has been a problem at quarterback and getting the right guy under center. So to hear that Baylor went after Will Howard, I'm going to look at it from the positive standpoint, but the realist in me tells me that was almost never going to happen, even at $4 million or $3 million or maybe even $2 million. Other bigger programs than Baylor were offering $2 million. But wow, Dave Aranda really, really wanted to put it all out there and complete this team in year 5 with with his job on the line. He knew it. Mac Rhodes knew it. Everyone knew it. Everyone knew this was a hot seat year for Dave Aranda. So having the ambition to go out and get Will Howard would have been one of the great moves in the history of the Baylor football program. I really think so. Having a quarterback of that ilk, a quarterback that elite, changes everything. And Baylor missed out on it. But $4 million, it makes you wonder what's going to happen for the future of this program. And if they can pony up that kind of money again, how much they try to downplay this pursuit, it becomes all the more fascinating when looking at the next offseason. But man, what could have been for this Baylor football program if they had brought in Will Howard for this hot seat year for Dave Aranda. We'll take a look at who actually does play quarterback for the Baylor Bears and what Joey McGuire had to say about him heading into this Butt Bowl matchup tomorrow. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. Hims is back, new sponsor of the show and getting plenty of buzz. But obviously, your sex life is important. Your schedule also really busy. You don't have the time to go to a doctor's office and get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. They're changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. They provide access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. It's all online. You go through a series of questions on their site. A medical provider is going to determine the right treatment option for you. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HAIMS.com/lockedon for your personal ED treatment options. hims.com/locked on. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions do apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription is required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. hims.com/locked on. All right, so from Hims to who is him? Who is the quarterback for this Baylor team? It's not Will Howard. And that was probably a long shot even with that price tag, right? It's not an attractive option for the one or two, first or second best quarterback in the transfer portal to say, yeah, you know what, I think I'm going to go to Baylor. Ohio State sounds about right. But who is the quarterback of this team is Sawyer Robertson. Bears brought in DeQuan Finn. He gets hurt and, was a bit shaky in that second game against Utah. Sawyer Robertson has taken that job and has not looked back. Now, is the record where it needs to be? No one's going to tell you 2-4 is the record where it needs to be. Regardless of who you played and how close some of these games are, you're staring down the barrel of 2-5 this weekend, going on the road against a good team. But there has been improvements in this team, thanks in large part to, offensively anyway, the leadership of Sawyer Robertson. And this game's going to mean a little bit more to him. And before we get into that aspect, on the Mosley Show this week, we did ask Joey McGuire about Sawyer Robertson, and the transfer portal gets mentioned in there. Here's what the Tech head coach had to say about the Baylor signal caller.
Yeah, Sawyer's special. I mean, I remember him coming out of high school and then remember him, we were at the time whenever he got in the portal. I mean, we had Tyler Shuck that's at Louisville and like you said, Donovan that's at Houston and Barron. So we weren't in a need for a quarterback to bring him back home. But, man, he's special, and you're 100% right. I mean, he's one of the main reasons they're in the position at the end of the games to beat Colorado or beat BYU. I mean, he left it all on the field against BYU, and he's playing at a really, really good level. I mean, he's a guy that can beat you with his arm and beat you with his feet. He continues drives with his feet, had a big rushing touchdown against Colorado. And so he's definitely a guy, that as we're looking at Baylor and what we've got to do, he's a guy that, we've got to make sure we also contain him in the pocket and not let him get loose, because he can really run the football too.
He's a guy that keeps them in these games. And I think for most of us watching Baylor week in, week out, we can agree with that sentiment. It's not that other guys aren't putting effort out there, but we know how different teams and games and seasons can be if you don't have the right quarterback out there. And it looks like with Baylor, they've got the right quarterback out there. So that's the start of something. Of course, they need to start winning games, right? And they need to run the ball better and run block better. But at least you've got something there at quarterback. We say it after every game, but boy, Sawyer looked good. And boy, Sawyer left it all out there. And he has clearly taken upon himself, this mantle of it's my team now. And everyone here is counting on me. So I've got to give max effort and get better week in, week out. And we're seeing that. We're literally seeing it play out in front of our eyes. He's never taken plays off. He's never missing easy throws. He is executing. He's putting out the effort, and everyone gets better around him because of that. And we've seen that with guys like Hal Presley. We have seen it with guys like Josh Cameron and Michael Trigg at tight end. These guys are getting better because Sawyer Robertson is also getting better. And I wonder if he's able to fuel himself just a little bit extra this week. Sawyer is from Lubbock Coronado High School. And I heard about it a little bit from Chris Level yesterday from Locked On Texas Tech. That was around the same time they were recruiting Baron Morton. And it became pretty apparent pretty quickly to Sawyer and his coaches and the Robertson family that Baron Morton was the guy that Tech really wanted, not the Lubbock kid. And I know that rubbed some people the wrong way within that Coronado program, but obviously Sawyer did have some great options. He went to go play for Lubbock legend Mike Leach out at Mississippi State before transferring to Baylor. But you also got to take into account something that Joey said in there too. So Tech, before Joey, didn't recruit him very hard. They recruited Baron Morton. They put their eggs in the Baron Morton basket. And then a year later, Sawyer Robertson's in the transfer portal, and they don't have a spot for him then either. If that doesn't light a fire in your belly, I don't know what will as a football player. Here's a kid going back to his hometown for the team he probably grew up rooting for. I mean, West Texas, that is Tech country. From the Panhandle down to the Permian Basin, all the way out to El Paso, basically. That is Tech country. He grew up rooting for this team, and he was good enough to play there. But at 2 times of asking, they said, no, we're all set. We're all good. That should be the ultimate bulletin board material for Sawyer Robertson. And not that these other games aren't important, and he won't ever admit this because he's a good team player, team guy, but this is the game that should have been circled on his calendar since he got to Baylor. And really this year, when he's battling for the starting quarterback job and knows that they're going to Lubbock this year, not coming to Waco. They're going to Lubbock. I mean, this has got to be a special, special occasion for him. I know he's going to have a bunch of people out there in the stands. And like Joey said, Sawyer at times keeps them in ball games. He's got that ability to do so. He's got that fight to do so. And this is a good test of it all right here. To go out there to Lubbock and take on that team that passed on you twice and go show them that it was a bad choice. Because right now they might not think it's a bad choice. Baron Morton's having a good season. 7-1 touchdown to interception ratio. 14-2 overall if you don't want to simplify it. And he's been a big reason as to why they are 5-1. And this is the opportunity for Sawyer to show, yeah, you guys should have picked me. Should have picked me. I'm glad we didn't really get LaDainian Tomlinson doing that to Baylor because hopefully we can look back at that the same way. You know, big miss by Baylor not getting LaDainian Tomlinson. Make this a big miss for Tech, Sawyer Robertson. Go have your LaDainian Tomlinson legacy in Lubbock. Make them wish that they would have gotten the kid from their own backyard instead of Baron Morton, who is having a good season. It just hopefully lines up to having that kind of fairy tale for Sawyer Robertson. Goes out there, throws for 280, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Bears get out there with an upset victory. We almost had it. Those of you from going to college in my era specifically will remember, we almost had it with Charlie Brewer. Almost. 2018 in Austin. His dad's school, his grandfather's school, his brother's school, the one that wouldn't recruit him when he was at Lake Travis. You heard it every broadcast that Charlie Brewer played at Baylor UT did not recruit him. And in 2018, they went down to Austin and they were down by a touchdown, the final drive. I think it was actually 6 points. Remember that Jamison Houston pick was taken off the board when it shouldn't have been, and UT scored a touchdown and they won by 4 or 6 points. It was within a score. But they had 2 4th and 10s on that drive that Charlie Brewer completed to Midway High legend Pooh Strickland. And they went right down the field. They had a 4th and goal with basically time for one last play. And it just sailed a little bit high, incomplete, game over. We were so close to getting that revenge toward Charlie Brewer victory in his hometown. And boy, how sweet that would have been. Now's your chance, Sawyer. It is your chance to go out there and prove to Tech, to Joey McGuire and Matt Wells before him, that they made a mistake and not bringing you out to Raiderland, keeping you at home. It's up to you to prove them wrong right now, tomorrow. We're also going to go over what Baylor players and units have to key in on, or what they have to key in on in this Tech game in order for Baylor to get the upset victory. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. First, I got to tell you about America's #1 sportsbook, all right? Because I'm looking at you, NFL fans. You want a big return early this season, maybe like a kickoff return for a touchdown kind of return? Boy, do I have the place for you. It's called FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Because when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So crazy, I got to repeat it. Will Howard, $4 million? No, not that. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel.com. Once again, FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We are counting down the hours to the Butt Bowl. By the time you are watching this or listening to this, I probably have already put out my Mayor Quimby tweet on the Locked On Baylor account. I might wait for tomorrow to do that. Yeah, let's wait for game day to do that. You haven't heard it yet, maybe. But we are getting ready, final preparations for Baylor Tech in Lubbock. Bears trying to repeat the magic that they had 2 years ago, their first trip in over a decade out to Lubbock. They had, first one with fans. Full house. They did lose in 2020. But they had the decisive victory 42-17 the last time they were out there, in which they picked off 5 passes. I doubt that's going to happen again. I don't think either of those things are going to happen again. But the game plan, I think from my standpoint of what Baylor can do that would somewhat play to their strength, that could really help their cause and potentially tap into a Tech deficiency, is the same thing I said against Iowa State. I look at Rocco Becht and Baron Morton very similarly. They're good quarterbacks. Are they great elite quarterbacks? No, but they're pretty darn good quarterbacks, both of them. And they don't put the ball in harm's way a lot. And I said this against Iowa State, that you can rattle Rocco. Like you can get to him a little bit. You know, you can, if you're able to get in his face, you know, like most other quarterbacks, but if you get into his face, you really force him into an uncomfortability factor that could turn the football over. We saw that in that Iowa State game. One of the few rushes they actually got in Rocco Becht's face turned into a play where he couldn't throw the ball away, and it ended up being a Garmin-Randolph interception, took points off the board right before halftime. Same thing with Baron Morton. The guy has been comfortable all season long. And you have another guy with a point to prove, not just Sawyer Robertson, but pass rusher Steve Linton, former Tech Red Raider. He's got a point to prove. Go out there and make Baron Morton, your former teammate, uncomfortable. Put him on his butt. That's what it's going to take in order to get Baron Morton uncomfortable, because he's been pretty comfy this year. And another one that seems very basic is you guys up front, you've got to do enough against Taj Brooks. And whether that's disguising coverages or just bottling him up on first and second down, like you've got to make someone else beat you, I guess is what I'm trying to say. My favorite NFL team, the Patriots, did it for years and years and years with Belichick. Take away the team's number one option. It's easier said than done, of course, but make someone else beat you. Because everyone knows that Taj Brooks is the guy who is probably going to beat you. He beats most teams by himself. He's so good at running it. Tech is so good at game planning around him. Make someone else beat you. Make Bear Morton beat you. I know he's having a good year, but he doesn't have a stellar record in the conference overall in his career. Make him beat you. Make Coy Eakin beat you. He had a pretty good game against you last year. If you can take him out of the equation, you're feeling like you're in good shape. But once again, it is about making the quarterback uncomfortable. And I know that's so often the case, but Baylor has shown at times to have a good pass rush. They really have. They even showed it in some of that BYU game. They really showed it in that Colorado game. And they did nothing outside of that one play I've mentioned in the Iowa State game. So if you can't get any pressure on him, or you can't load up the box and limit Taj Brooks, if you're just going to let him run free the way you used to do with, I almost said Darren Sproles, the other guy, Deuce Vaughn for Kansas State all those years, then it's not going to happen. You're not going to win. But I think there is it's going to take a lot. I'll say that. It's going to take a lot of stellar individual performances for Baylor. I think offensively, with the bye week and some more practice time for Sawyer Robertson to connect with these guys and hopefully find a run game. I know it's easier said than done. I think offensively, they'll be able to hang. Tech's got a good defense this year, probably not quite as good as Iowa State, but pretty decent defense so far this year. They can hang offensively. It's about limiting what is at times an explosive Tech offense and limiting explosive plays within that, especially in the run game. That's the only shot Baylor has is to make Taj Brooks not the number one star of the game, to use a hockey term for Texas Tech. Let me know what you guys think about the score prediction of this game. What do you think it's going to be? Do you think Sawyer Robertson's going to get revenge back at his hometown? And do you believe the Will Howard thing? Do you believe Baylor shelled out $4 million for Will Howard in the offseason? Give me your thoughts, because I can hear out why you don't think Baylor can even put this kind of money together. But I also, like I mentioned in that first segment, I can see why Baylor would try to put that kind of money up in this desperate a situation. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Give your score predictions as well for the Butt Bowl chapter 100 or whatever it is. Let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. We're very close to those 3,000 subscribers. I know there's some Tech fans watching too. You feel free to subscribe too. That's all right. You keep up with and if we continue to stink, you can laugh at us. But be sure to like and subscribe, ring that notification bell, get notified every time we're dropping a video. It comes out on YouTube every day, and then wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll be back with you tomorrow for the #1 Baylor football postgame destination. We will see you then on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.